In the 1970s, these bands ruled the airwaves. They sold out arenas. They shaped the sound of rock as we know it. And then, they disappeared. Not because they failed, but because history kept moving. Today, their names rarely come up in conversation, yet their riffs, their melodies, their influence, they're still everywhere. You probably danced to their songs in high school. You've heard their sound echoed in the bands that followed. So how did hitmakers become ghosts? Tonight, we're rewinding the tape, uncovering the 12 forgotten 70s bands that quietly rewrote rock history while the world wasn't paying attention. Number 1, the J. Geils Band. Before centerfold became shorthand for jukeboxes, gym dances, and that exact moment you learned what rhymed with classroom, the J. Geils Band had already spent a decade burning American stages to the ground. That's the part most people forget. Long before MTV ever touched them, they were road warriors, turning clubs into sweat boxes and crowds into accomplices. This wasn't just a rock band, it was a full-blown rock and soul carnival. Harmonica solos screaming like sirens, sax breaks dripping with heat, and Peter Wolf at the mic, half preacher, half party ringleader, daring the room to keep up. Their 70s run was electric. Albums like Live Full House didn't polish the chaos, they preserved it. While other bands chased heavy riffs or prog rock epics, J. Geils stitched together R&B, funk, blues, and garage rock with a grin and a groove that felt dangerous. Songs like Must Have Got Lost and Looking for a Love may not dominate classic rock radio now, but they carved out a lane for rock that didn't brood, it moved. And yet, history boiled them down to 1 or 2 late career hits. Forgotten by the mainstream, maybe, but if you ever saw them live, would you really forget that feeling? If you only know J. Geils from Centerfold, what do you think you missed? 2. Bread. If you ever sat cross-legged on shag carpet, staring at the ceiling while your thoughts drifted a little too far inward, there's a good chance Bread was playing. They weren't chasing guitar heroics or psychedelic freakouts. They were doing something riskier, slowing everything down. Bread specialized in melody, vulnerability, and emotional honesty. David Gates had a voice smoother than a freshly Zambonied ice rink, and when Make It With You hit number 1 in 1970, soft rock officially stepped into the spotlight. Suddenly, it was okay to feel things on the radio. Then came Baby I'ma Want You, Everything I Own. These weren't just love songs, they were quiet gut punches, the kind that snuck up on you. Music that made you miss someone you hadn't even met yet. Bread stocked up 7 straight top 20 hits and helped define the softer side of the decade. They laid the groundwork for Air Supply, England Dan and John Ford Coley, and even Chicago's more tender moments. Today, though, they're often filed away on love song compilations and background playlists. That's the irony. Soft rock didn't just get its name from Bread. It got its heart, its emotional center, its bread and butter. When was the last time you actually listened to a Bread song instead of just hearing it? 3. The Raspberries. Now let's talk about the band that mashed teen heartbreak, thunderous drums, and Beatles haircuts into something so catchy it practically came with a bubblegum-scented 45 sleeve. The Raspberries didn't knock politely. They exploded out of Cleveland in the early 70s like a sugar rush plugged straight into an amp. Fronted by Eric Carmen, a singer who could flip from dreamy to desperate in a single verse, the band struck gold with Go All the Way in 1972. It sounded like someone looked at the radio and said, what if hooks mattered again? This wasn't nostalgia cosplay. At a time when hard rock and prog epics ruled the airwaves, the Raspberries revived the art of the 3-minute power pop anthem. Tight harmonies, explosive choruses, lyrics balancing innocence with urgency. They weren't copying the Beatles, they were continuing the mission. Bruce Springsteen felt it. Kiss took notes. Cheap Trick practically built a career by cranking that formula to 11. Yet despite the hits and TV appearances, the band never became a household name. Eric Carmen's solo ballads soared, but the Raspberries were boxed up with the rest of the forgotten 45s. And that's the tragedy, because without them, power pop might have fizzled out before it ever found its platform shoes. How many bands you love today trace their sound back to the Raspberries without even knowing it? 4. The Grassroots. You might not recognize the name right away, but trust me, you know the Grassroots. If you ever belted Temptation Eyes into a hairbrush or swayed to Midnight Confessions, you've already been pulled into their orbit. In the late 60s and early 70s, they were everywhere. Sun-soaked California vibes, equal parts garage grit and pop polish. Catchy choruses, airtight hooks, grooves that slid into every radio format like butter on toast. They weren't flashy, and that may be why they're often skipped in rock documentaries. No scandals, no dramatic implosions, just results. Over a dozen top 40 singles, more than 20 million records sold. Quietly, they bridged eras, connecting the raw edge of 60s rock to the cleaner, radio-ready sound that dominated the 70s. Without them, bands like REO Speedwagon, Styx, and Foreigner don't land the same way. They didn't chase the spotlight. They built the road radio rock still drives on. And let's be honest, that hook from Sooner or Later? Yeah, it still slops. Why do we remember chaos more than consistency in rock history? 5. Poco. Ever hear Crazy Love or Rose of Cimarron and suddenly feel like you're riding shotgun down a sunburnt back road? That's Poco, one of those bands you recognize instantly by feel, even if the name doesn't always stick. Before the Eagles dominated playlists and stacked platinum records, Poco was already laying the groundwork. Born out of the ashes of Buffalo Springfield, they blended country twang with rock rhythms in a way that felt warm, open, and brand new. Pedal steel guitars, smooth harmonies, songs that practically begged you to roll the windows down. You Better Think Twice doesn't just play, it moves. And here's the twist. Poco didn't just invent country rock, they handed it off. Randy Meisner left to form the Eagles, Timothy B. Schmidt followed. Poco became the training ground for a sound others took straight to the bank. They never chased flash or fame, but their DNA runs through an entire era of California country rock. So I can't be with you now, babe. If you love that sound, and let's be honest, who didn't, then you already love Poco, whether you realized it or not. Should the band that created the sound be remembered less than the band that perfected it? 6. America. The moment a horse with no name drifts in, something shifts. Dry heat, desert air, a sense that you're wandering through your own thoughts. That was America's magic. They emerged in the early 70s with acoustic guitars, soft harmonies, and lyrics vague enough to feel personal. And here's the twist. They weren't even American. They were sons of US servicemen stationed in England, somehow capturing an idealized version of America that felt even more wistful. After Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young set the table, America pulled up a chair and added their own harmony-heavy folk pop.
Well, I keep on thinking about you, sister, golden hair so bright.
Hit after hit followed, yet they rarely get the credit they deserve. If you came of age in the 70s, their music wasn't just playing, it was living quietly in the background of your best memories. America didn't just write songs, they created spaces you could exist inside. What America song instantly takes you back, and where does it take you? 7. The Sweet. If Ballroom Blitz makes you want to shout, "Are you ready, Steve?" and flip a coffee table for dramatic effect, then you already know The Sweet. If you ever strutted into a roller rink wearing satin pants and a fearless grin, chances are they were blasting overhead. The Sweet were glam rock chaos in its purest form, glitter and grit, sugar and steel. Ballroom Blitz wasn't just a hit, it was a detonation. And Fox on the Run? That was cool bottled. Kiss, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, they all owe a debt here. The Sweet proved you could be theatrical and hit hard. Broadway hooks backed by Marshall stacks. Massive in Europe, successful in the States, and still undercredited. You might not hear them every day now, but their fingerprints are all over rock history. They made pop punch harder. They made a rock strut bolder. They didn't just bring the blitz, they wrote the rulebook in glitter. 8. Atlanta Rhythm Section. Atlanta Rhythm Section was the cool older brother, clean car, smooth voice, steady hands on the wheel. While other southern rock bands were spilling beer and breaking chairs, ARS dimmed the lights, mixed a drink, and invited you to stay a while. That was the gamble, and it's why they're often misunderstood. They took southern rock's soul and sanded off the rough edges. No barroom brawls here. This was candlelight, cocktails, and confidence. Imaginary Lover didn't hit like Spooky by accident. It floated. That velvety groove still carried a southern drawl, but now it wore cologne and knew how to dance. What really set ARS apart was how quietly they blended genres. No announcements, no reinvention press releases, just soul, pop, soft rock, and southern muscle fused together with studio polish. That crossover sound carved out an entire lane of radio-friendly southern rock for listeners who never even heard of Muscle Shoals. You could play ARS on a rock station and while making dinner. How many bands can pull that off? They had hits, they had chops, but they refused flash and controversy, and that's the conflict. Rock history remembers chaos louder than control. Overlooked today? Maybe, but Atlanta Rhythm Section didn't water down southern rock, they expanded what it could be. Why do we overlook bands simply because they made it sound too easy? 9. The Babies. Don't let the name fool you. The Babies weren't singing lullabies, they were laying the blueprint for the power ballad. Glam rock emotion, arena-sized ambition, big feelings with bigger hooks. If you slow danced to Isn't It Time or quietly slid Every Time I Think of You onto a mixtape you absolutely didn't make for someone specific, then you already know their power. Fronted by a young John Waite whose voice could turn from fragile to devastating in a single breath, the Babies didn't just play songs, they lifted them into the rafters. They weren't topping every chart, but they were building a bridge. One foot in 70s glam swagger, the other stepping straight into 80s arena bombast. And here's where it gets wild. Members of the Babies became the next wave. Jonathan Cain left and co-wrote Don't Stop Believin' with Journey. John Waite scored a solo #1 with Missing You. So even if the Babies never became a household name, their sound absolutely did. Today, they're a deep cut in record bins and memory banks, but their influence lives on in every slow-build rock anthem that makes you clench your fist and sing like nobody's watching. They didn't stay long, but they left fingerprints. How many forgotten bands actually shaped the biggest songs you know by heart?
Got the love, you got the time, and I've got the time.